Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each week I look to bring you a different guest who has inspired, encouraged, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm thrilled this week for my guest, Brandon Beck. Brandon, tell everybody kind of who you are.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I am an educator true and through in many different ways. I am a fifth grade monolingual, bilingual educator in Westchester County, New York. I am also a coach. I run a small business as well that I also work with kids, players that are serious about playing soccer and playing soccer from ages 4 to 23 all the way up into college and beyond. I'm a college professor. I'm a trainer for an organization called Mudagrees, which helps brings comfort dogs into schools. And I am also, in addition to that, obviously, I'm a professional soccer coach, but I also work for the United States Soccer Federation as an instructor who goes around and gives licenses to what's called grassroots coaches. So basically anybody who's looking to get a license to coach at the lowest level and all the way up to the highest.
Okay, so we got so much to dive into today because my brain is already spinning with all the thousands of questions I want to ask you with all that varied different things that your hands are in. But whenever I do these conversations, I always love to start with the same question first. And that is, when you were a kid dreaming what you were going to be when you grew up, does it align at all with anything you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the product of two retired teachers who both taught for a total of, when I add them together, 72 years. So I like to say I'm finishing or continuing on in the family business. I always loved playing soccer. I played in college, I played professionally. And when I finished playing professionally, I returned right to coaching and I returned to the classroom, and there was always coaching and teaching were something that I always wanted to do. They just went hand in hand, not only in the schedule, but also just in, the philosophy of everything.
So when did you decide that, not only did you obviously, of course, love playing soccer, when did you decide you really wanted to put in the extra effort to be pouring into others and growing their skill set?
Yeah. So, like, when I was about 14 years old, I was really serious about it. And I had a couple trainers that I was working with. I was a goalkeeper. So it's more of a one on one position. So I happened to be fortunate to work with some really great coaches along the way. But there was one coach in specific that I worked with, and I just fell in love with everything that he was doing, and I fell in love with the mindset behind it. And being a goalkeeper on a soccer field is a lot different than being a field player. It's a very much a
Mhm.
leader perspective, like a quarterback for a football team. And I just really fell in love with his teaching and his practice. And it led me to, I was working at camps when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. And by the time I was junior or senior in high school, I was, leading camps on my own, groups of kids, and it just took off. So it was something that I was always involved in.
I love that. And something else that I heard you mention that really caught my ear when you were introducing yourself was the work that you do with dogs and bringing the therapy dogs into school. Talk to me a little bit about that. First of all, how'd you even get involved in something like that?
Oh man, that is a long story. Well, first of all, I forgot to mention probably one of the most important things is that I'm also an author, and I have a book coming
Mhm.
out called Unlocking Unlimited Potential, and it's coming out from Codebreaker and Brian Aspinall, and it's
Mhm.
coming out, in December and any week now, and a lot of the stories that I'm talking about are in the actual book, and this is a long story, but I'm going to put it in the shortest version possible. And it started with my kids. I have a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, and I just have now a 1 month old. So it's a
Oh.
pretty, a lot going on in my house right now.
Mhm.
But the 7-year-old and the 10-year-old about 3 years ago wanted a dog like every other kid in America and in the world that wants one. And, I kind of was my wife and I were always pushing off the idea, we didn't really want to jump into it. And I ended up reading one day in my class, in my fifth grade class, a Time for Kids magazine.
Mhm.
And it was a Time for Kids article in it. And it was about this organization called Mutt Agrees. And it's out of Yale University. and they are associated with animal shelters all over the United States, the North Shore Animal League, and Pet Savers Foundation. And as I read the article, obviously my students were like, "That's really cool. You know, can we get a dog in class?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's funny." And I went home and I read the article to my kids, my children, and they had the same response. And so I kind of like the idea of, hey, if I got a dog, maybe it would serve more purpose than just being an animal in the home. It could help all these other kids. And so I ended up sending a message to Time for Kids, and they gave me the contact information. I sent it, and I heard back from the people at Mudagrees like instantly. And they're on the phone with me. They're answering all the questions. They're talking to me about the program. They're selling me on it, and just it's a pretty easy sale. Basically, the idea is that Mudagrees basically turns the stereotype on purebred animals being service dogs, basically. And so
Mhm.
they use shelter pets, and it's like giving them that second chance. And there's
Yeah.
this whole curriculum that was designed by Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer.
Uh-huh.
I had a chance to be on a training with him, like in his living room. It was wild. And long story short, she was like, "What kind of dog do you want?" And I was like, "Well, I want a hypoallergenic dog. I really want a dog, that's younger, because I don't want to have to worry about that whole idea of,
Mhm.
teaching an old dog new tricks. I don't want to see if that phrase is really something that is true." And so she's like, "Yeah, sure, no problem. 3 to 6 months is usually what it will take for us to find a dog that specific." And I was like, "Great, no problem." She called me back 3 days later, and they found a standard poodle. She was 13 weeks old, and my kids and I went and visited her at the shelter, and the rest was just history. And then it was jumping through all the hoops at school. My school was super supportive of the program. They still are now. And she has been a huge part of our school. And she has really taken to her role, and she works with over 100 kids. When she comes into school, she does a before school mentor program. I have kids that, I went to the principal and I said, "Listen, give me the list." And she's like, "What list?" I'm like, "Give me the list of the kids who don't want to be here." And she was like, "Okay." So she gave me the list of the kids who are constantly in her office and who had been kind of having trouble lately. And
Mhm.
these kids ended up showing up an hour before school. They were getting taxis, fifth graders, 10, 11-year-old kids getting taxis to school. Kids that were in pull-out reading classrooms that didn't want to be in it were now showing up waiting at the door when the teacher got there. And there's just like 9 million other stories, but it's just been a really rewarding experience, an awesome time.
I love that story so much, not only because of the idea of bringing a dog in and getting to be that therapy, but also that they're rescue dogs. I think that is, and shelter dogs, just, that to me adds a whole nother level of giving back than anything else. And so, how long have you been doing this now?
So I started it. It took about a year full just to get the dog cleared to come into school because she was so young. So I had to invest in
Right.
some, personal training on my end because I wanted it to be right, and I wanted it to be
Mhm.
right in my home as well. So I would take my own personal children to the training with the trainer. And just I had never had a dog before either. So I would needed to learn how to handle her and get her ready to be in a class and come up with all these procedures. So it took like a full year before she came into class. And then it was like I had to take her into the building with nobody in it. I had to walk her around, get her used to seeing paper on the floor, the noises, the sounds. It was all this wild stuff. And then the following year, she was in the school, which was last year. She was in the school twice a week. We worked her up to 2 times a week. There's a whole schedule that goes with it. I have 3 other awesome teachers that take her during the day, so she's not in my classroom all day long.
Uh-huh.
And then now with COVID, we've kind of been inching our way back into it. But
Right.
it's going to happen. My wife had a baby, and I didn't want to introduce the dog and then leave for 6 weeks and then come back and have it be like
Yeah.
a complete separation anxiety on top of all the other crazy things
Yeah.
going on in 2020.
Well, I just that to me that's such a cool thing, and it's always been something I've wanted to do or be a part of, and so getting to hear from someone who's been through it themselves, that's pretty cool. Well,
Yeah, and the curriculum itself too is a social emotional learning curriculum, and
uh-huh,
it's an awesome curriculum that they use that they have that goes in line, and it's all about taking animals' emotions, service animals, giving back, and there's all these different parts to it that are really great. It's an awesome curriculum. I've really enjoyed using it.
Well, I visited a school in Dallas once who had a dog that they had trained to bring in that was in the life skills classroom. And it did go and visit some of the general ed classrooms. But when I got to go visit, I got to watch the child that was specifically assigned to the dog, and just to see the way the dog just calmed her and brought her to center and helped her move from station to station. It was such a neat experience. Just it's a reminder that as educators, sometimes we have to think outside the box, and do things differently. And so, when you were talking about the dog, though, you also mentioned that in the midst of pandemic, new kid, dog, all this other stuff, you also wrote a book called Unlocking Unlimited Potential. And you said it comes out this December 2020. And so kind of give me the elevator pitch over what it's about and how you came about the idea to want to put it into a book.
Yeah, absolutely. The elevator pitch is this. The book is about how inside of all of us as educators is where we have to begin. And inside of all of us is a power that if we can tap into that power and understand the power that's inside of us, that we will be able to unleash that on everybody we serve.
Yeah.
And that's it in a nutshell. And it just kind of, I'm a big reader of, Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, Rachel Hollis, Brene Brown, and I love their work. And I haven't seen a lot of their work in education in terms of books that are being written right now. A lot of, we're usually quoting Dewey, and we're quoting Maslow, and we're quoting the original people, and they deserve their place. Trust me, they really deserve it. But there's a lot of other work that's being done there with, life skills and life coaches and personal development experts that I think is really important to bring into the classroom, And so, that's kind of a lot of the kind of backup, the kind of research that I use inside of the book. And it goes through, three different parts. Building up the foundation is the first part. The second part is using challenges as opportunities to grow, where I talk a little bit about challenges that other educators face, that I've faced, that athletes face, that, other professionals faced, like, Sal Khan from Khan Academy, how all of these people came up with these innovative ideas because of these challenges that they faced. And then it just talks about at the end, the third part is believing in you, and how often, with all the craziness and all the different things that are happening in the world, politically and not politically, and, COVID and pandemic, all of this is just, it's really can be wearing. And, teacher burnout is obviously a real concern. But, why is it that some of the greatest teachers that I've ever met, why is it that some of them get burnt out? And why is it that some of them don't hold on to that power? And it goes back to, believing in your why, and understanding your purpose, and being able not only to empower that in yourself, but empower that in your students.
Well, there's so many great things that I love that you said there, that this is a book I'm excited about because, like you said, I'm a big fan of the other people you mentioned as well. So anything in the line of that has me intrigued. But I got to ask, one question that I try to include in each of these episodes at some point is, despite the success or things that you've got to experience, or the excitement of a new book coming out and things like that, no matter how many great things happen, we all still struggle with doubt and that comparison, and feeling like our stuff isn't as good as others, or we wish this or that. And so my question for you is, how do you personally keep doubt at bay so it doesn't take root into your own life?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, nobody is perfect. And, even writing this book, I sit there and think, well, is anybody going to want to read this? Is people going to really want to listen to Brandon Beck's story? Who's Brandon Beck? And so there's that whole like imposter syndrome. So,
Yeah.
It's funny because at the onset of this, like right before, probably like 3 months before I got a publishing deal, I actually reached out to the Tony Robbins coaching group, and I personally invested in a Tony Robbins coach.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I do is I meet with my coach every week, and we sit down and we go through kind of like RPM goal setting strategies, SMART goal strategies, just kind of taking your life and putting it into categories, personal life, financial life, business life. And just, you wake up every morning and you have those 9 million things that you have to do. and just kind of being grateful and that you get to do these things.
Yeah.
And I think that in a nutshell, for me, it's been having a coach. It's been having somebody to walk alongside. It's been being able to be in the Twitterverse and get on Twitter chats and connect with people all over the country like yourself, and reach out to people. I mean, I haven't really been shy about it. I've been reaching out to all different people. And I would say 99.9% of the time, people like yourself and other people like Brian and Adam Welcome and David Schmittou and so many other people at the Teach Better team and stuff, they reach back out immediately. Sure, let's talk. Let's how can we help each other? How can we get to the next level? Because I didn't really know that this whole Twitterverse existed. I was never even on Twitter before, like really religiously, before this pandemic. And once I started to realize, I was like, why do I see all these things that say A1, Q1, hashtag, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I started to learn that there was this thing called Twitter chats. And I was like, I loved it. I'm in like 4 or 5 of them a week. And it's just, finding your inner strength, and what works for me may not necessarily work for everybody. And I just hope that, I can provide enough skills and ideas so that people can empower themselves.
I love that, and I love hearing your own reflection and personal journey. For me, it's a time for me to reflect about when I went through those same steps of exactly what you're talking about. And I will tell you, that idea in your head of, is anybody even going to read this? Who wants to hear my story? No matter how many books you write, that will always be in the back of your brain, because every time I put something out there, I'm like, why am I even doing this? Who even wants to read this? Who isn't going to care? But it's kind of thing you got to get over yourself and just share who you are, and it's meant for somebody to hear. And so, Brandon, as we wrap this conversation up, one question I always love to end these on are, I believe as humans, there's so many things that we hold true to ourselves and are who we are. And so if people were listening or watching today and you want them to walk away with one thing, what's your one thing for them?
Oof. I mean, there's so many things, but that one thing I would say is that inside of you and inside of all of us and inside of everybody we teach, that there is something that keeps our fire lit. There is something that motivates us. There is something that we really love. And being able to find what works for you, what works for your students, and what works for your colleagues and everybody around it. And it might be something as easy as just spending 2 like uninterrupted minutes with a colleague and speaking to them and just hearing them out. Those 2 minutes can go such a long way. Or spending 5 minutes of your day and just writing down the things that you're grateful for, or writing down the things, 5 incantations or 5 things that, that affirmations that really lead to so much power in the long run. So finding what works for you is something that you have to start with, is where I would really start this journey, and where I would really recommend that everybody else look to find. And then when you find that thing, hold on to it and try it for 7 days straight, try it for 10 days straight. And once you build and be consistent, you'll find that, your unlimited potential can be unleashed.
I love that. Well, Brandon, I have been so excited to chat with you about all these things today. So thank you so much for spending some time with me on Tell Your Story.
No problem. Thank you so much. My pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for joining another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your stuff, it's there. Go get a copy of Brandon Beck's new book, Unlocking Unlimited Potential, and make sure to get out there and tell your story, because every story